Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1801A, and today's date is February 26, 2019, and the title of the episode is Those That Are the Loudest, Economic Awakening Begins. Now, before we get started, I want to talk about the Patriots. Our Patriot-in-Chief, Donald Trump, is winning a few carries as he goes into his own third quarter. Now, that's worth celebrating, and that's what Noble Gold has done. They've commissioned these stunning President Trump 2020 Freedom Coins. You can get these in 0.999% fine solid silver and even 24-karat solid gold. You can display them in your home or office in this stylish presentation box along with their certificate of authenticity. Noble Gold is running a special offer. If you buy 3 coins, use the code X22 to get free shipping. Just click on the link below. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, the deep state and the central banks, they are starting to get a little bit worried. Remember, they had this plan to bring down the economy in 2020. They were going to turn this whole thing around. This is why you saw all the mainstream media articles talking about the recession in 2020. Q told us that, don't worry, they have a plan in place and they're going to reverse this. Now, how did they reverse this? This was all done through statistics, by pumping up the stock market, by making the numbers look great. And we know that the Fed can control if the economy stays up or if the economy comes down. All they need to do is raise rates and tighten. And if they lower rates or they keep rates steady and they stop the tightening, guess what happens? The economy stays the way it is. That doesn't mean that the people's economy behind the scenes is staying the way it is. It means the statistical numbers look okay. The manipulated numbers look okay. The stock market looks okay. And we'll be discussing what just happened and the mainstream media and what they're reporting now. But first, let's look at some of the people's economy here. And we're starting to see that things are rapidly falling apart in the United States. Even though the GDP numbers, the unemployment numbers, the stock market, all that looks great, from the Fed just raising the rates a couple basis points, we see there are problems in the economy. Remember, this is based on an illusion. This economy that we are in is in an illusion. And when you look at the housing market, this is an excellent indicator on what is really happening here. Now, home price growth, it is slowing right now. Remember, the central banks, they pumped the housing bubbles up. This is what they do. They pump bubbles up and then they pop them. And it looks like the growth rate is now starting to slow. And this is the weakest since September 2012. We also see using U.S. housing starts, they crashed in December. They crashed by 11.2% month-to-month in December. Now remember, it's going to take a little bit of time for the housing market to settle down here because the Fed was raising interest rates, and all of a sudden they're in a holding pattern. So we're getting data from back in December. And what we can see from this is that as the Fed raised rates, the housing market started to fall apart. Housing starts, they tumbled by 10.9% year on year. This is the biggest drop since 2011. But we need to remember something very important. The Fed is now in a holding pattern. This is data from December while the Fed was raising rates. It doesn't happen in a split second. It takes time. So since the Fed is in a holding pattern, and we'll have to see if they lower the interest rates, the housing market will start to stabilize a little bit. But we can see from what the Fed has been doing that the housing market is hurting because Home Depot, it looks like their sales are cooling along with the real estate market. So with the Fed raising rates during the year of 2018, it really hurt the people's economy. And this was being done on purpose because they built an illusion, and the deep state, the central bankers, they are planning to bring the illusion down. They have full control. But who controls the Fed now? Who controls the magic wand? It is Trump. And remember back in post 2575, this is back in December 10th, 2018, Q said the following: the plan to have the Fed raise rates, steep incline beginning March 2019, in an effort to kill the economy prior to the 2020 election. is known and planned for. Structure change coming. Now, let's go back to September 13th, 2018. This is from Bloomberg, and it says, warnings keep coming about a downturn that will hit in 2020. So back then, and it was just not Bloomberg, it was CNBC, NBC, CNN, all the mainstream media outlets, they were all out there telling us that in 2020, we're going to see a downturn in the economy, a recession. Now, they even told us it was going to be in the later half of that year because they were planning it right at the point where the elections were going to happen, maybe a month or two right before. I would say a month, probably in October. Fast forward to October 1st, 2018. It says, and this is coming from Bloomberg also, 2/3 of U.S. business economists see recession by end of 2020. And they continue with this narrative because they believed, they thought they had control, and they thought that the entire system was planned to come down in 2020 because this was their plan. They tried everything else to get Trump out of office. And their last Hail Mary was to destroy the economy that he created, to make it look, the economy that he made look fantastic. So they thought, listen, if we can destroy this, people will shy away from him. But remember what Q said in Post 2575. The plan to have the Fed raise rates, steep incline beginning March 2019. We're moving into March now. We're in February. And Q told us that they know this plan and they're taking care of it. Look at today's article from Bloomberg. The Fed has done much to delay the next recession. Now, look what just happened. Trump controls the Fed. How do we know this? Well, Q told us that they understood that they were going to bring down the economy in 2020 by raising the rates in 2019 like we've never seen before. Then all of a sudden, the Fed decided they were going to go into a holding pattern. And the Fed is also standing ready to cut rates if needed. So if the holding pattern isn't enough to stop the recession, they're instructed to bring the rates down, cut them. And this will boost the markets. It will boost the economy because we know the central bank controls all of it. It's not an open and free market. Trump is controlling all of it with the magic wand. He has full control. Again, how do we know this? Well, we understand that there's good players and bad players in the Fed. The good players are working with Trump, trying to bring down the Federal Reserve System. The bad players, the deep state, they're trying to keep their system operational. So all of a sudden, we have former Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen saying that Trump lacks a basic understanding of the role and goals of the Federal Reserve and how the Fed helps the economy. Well, let's go back to Trump's tweet. This is December 24th, 2018. And he said, the only problem our economy has is the Fed. They don't have a feel for the market. They don't understand necessary trade wars or strong dollars or even Democrat shutdowns over borders. The Fed is like a powerful golfer who can't score because he has no touch. He can't putt. Trump understands what the Fed is. He understands that the Fed is no good for this country. This is why Q is out there saying that gold is going to be bringing down the Fed. So Yellen was asked if she believes Trump has a grasp of economic policy. And she directly answered, no, I do not. Yellen went further to say that Trump had hoped the Fed would base its exchange rate moves on Trump's trade plans and his eagerness to address the U.S. trade's imbalance. These hopes came in spite of the fact that the Federal Reserve traditionally acts independently and without interference from the executive branch, even though the president appoints its chairperson. Trump is not allowing the Fed to act independently. It is a private corporation. The Fed will be acting the way Trump wants it to act. The Fed will be taking down. Now, why is Yellen out there talking about Trump, talking about not understanding the Fed? Because they're projecting, because they understand they're taking down the Fed. Remember, post 2576, those with the most to lose are the loudest. Now, to take this a step further, Jerome Powell, he is testifying in front of the Senate. And Jerome Powell, he unleashed some common sense on the latest fraud being thrust upon the Americans. And that is the modern monetary theory, MMT. The MMT argues that because America borrows in its own currency, it can always print more dollars to cover its obligations. As a result, the thinking goes, the U.S. can always run sustained budget deficits and rack up ever-increasing debt burdens. Now, people do believe that the Fed and the U.S. government, they can just continually print and borrow and print and borrow, print and borrow forever, and there are no consequences whatsoever. We know this not to be true. And Senator David Perdue asked Powell about the theory, saying its advocates back a spending now, spend later, spend often policy that would use massive annual deficits to fund these tremendously expensive policy proposals. MMT advocates figure the Fed would be a partner in funding these programs through easy monetary policy. Powell's response was brief and to the point. This is what we call the economic awakening, the beginning stages. He said the idea that deficits don't matter for countries that can borrow in their own currency, I think is just wrong. And to the extent that people are talking about using the Fed, our role is not to provide support for particular policies. Decisions about spending and controlling spending and paying for it are really for you. Simply put, Powell explained that the increasingly popular theory espoused by progressives that the government can continue to borrow to fund social programs such as Medicare for everyone, free college tuition, and a conversion to renewable energy in the next decade is unworkable and makes some pretty extreme claims. Early in the hearing, Powell also knows that the U.S. debt is fairly high to the level of GDP, and much more importantly, it's growing faster than GDP. Really significantly faster. We're going to have to spend less or raise more revenue, or get rid of the debt. Remember, Trump is a master in dealing with bankruptcies, in dealing with debt. And I do believe that this is the beginning stages of an economic awakening. Remember, yes, we all know this. We know the central bank is not good for this country. We know debt is not good for this country. We know continually borrowing is not good for this country. But think of all the people around the country that have no idea what the Federal Reserve is, that have no idea that continuous borrowing is not going to work, that we need to reverse course. We need to end the central bank. And I do believe with Yellen yelling out there, saying that Trump has no idea what he's doing, doesn't understand the Federal Reserve, they're nervous and they're afraid. They know what is coming. And they're projecting out there, trying to make it seem like he has no clue in what he is doing. Well, he knows exactly what he's going to do. He's been talking about the Fed for a very long time. If you go back to all his tweets, he's been talking about gold for a very long time. And you can see that they're at the beginning stages of trying to wake people up. And we're going to see a lot more of this as we move forward. Actually, we're going to see Trump talk about the Fed and talk about borrowing, talk about the debt, and how we need to start changing what we do. And the first change is to stop borrowing from the Fed. How do we do that? We create our own currency. And you can see already the awakening has started. Those people who are scared that the Federal Reserve is going to end, they're starting to speak up. And we'll most likely see a lot more of them start to speak up. We'll see the mainstream media defend them. So what has happened? Trump has taken control of the Fed. The recession is put on hold. The deep state, the central bank, they lost out on bringing down the economy in the 2020 elections. Now it's Trump and the Patriots' turn. Here comes the hammer. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.